So here we are. 2 weeks in a row, I promised you I'd do an extra podcast before the event. This week I didn't, and now I'm here. Because I like to subvert expectations. When I have my son, I'll do the same thing to teach him about romantic relationships with women. Or men. I don't care if my son's gay. I'm equal opportunities in my traumatizing of my children. But here we are regardless. We're going to be talking about Stipe... No. That other heavyweight who's not as good. Cain Velasquez versus Francis Ngannou. If you didn't see, I popped up a little video yesterday on the YouTube channel just about Ngannou because I was one of the dudes, you know, people are going to be like, oh, you changed your tune on Ngannou. But I was one of the dudes rolling my eyes so hard that it hurt every time that Ngannou's punching power was played up. I was one of the dudes saying, anytime they're talking about only punching power as the big reason you should care about this fight, you're probably being sold a pack of lies. You know, anytime that you're relying on someone's one-punch power to beat the great champion of so-and-so, it's because there's not a lot else to tell you about them. But he's always got a chance, but, you know, it's a chance. It's not actually being able to fight as well as the other dude. But still, nothing sells fights to suckers quite as easily, and to experienced veterans. I'm still going, I wish Rumble Johnson had fought John Jones. Even after seeing Rumble ragdoll him twice, and him basically quit both times. I'm still like, but if he hit Jones, Jones has never tasted power like that. That's my favourite one. And fighters believe that bullshit too. They're like, oh, he's never tasted power like mine. And it's normally some guy who's got like 3 knockouts on their record, and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, in terms of power, Ngannou hits really, really hard. Not as hard as advertised. He's not the hardest hitter in the world. That'll be some 500-pound dude who only hits the heavy bag all day and doesn't actually do any other boxing practice. But he does hit extremely hard. And as I said in that video, he's doing better at bringing it off a proper base now. If you watch his first fights in the UFC, there is a lot of him going into a stance that's too long for him to feel comfortable, stepping his right foot up, and then his left foot up to advance. So he goes from awkward stance to standing right over his feet to awkward stance. If you get hit over your feet, never a good thing because you're off balance. But more than that, you can't generate the same power on your shots. You know, he was still generating big power. There's a great clip I used in the video where he gets caught completely off guard, over his feet, out of position by whoever he was fighting, Enrique, some guy you've never heard of since, and backs up and just swats this guy while he's falling over and knocks the guy down, and the guy comes up pursuing a single leg. That's the kind of power we're talking about, but he used to be really bad for getting out of position, which is expected because he'd only been fighting for like 3 years or whatever. Oh, people get really mad whenever you say it. I don't know the full details of it. I know that he shoveled a lot of sand or some shit like that. I've got the basic points to hit of the Francis Ngannou origin story. He may be 50 years old. We're not sure. But I called that video the UFC's most fastest improving fighter, ? And people were like, oh, I think you'll find, and then listed a load of guys who've done incredible things over the last couple of years. But my point was more that I was so unimpressed with Francis Ngannou when he first came in. Max Holloway and Tony Ferguson, they've made great improvements over the last couple of years, but neither of them made it into the UFC when they literally didn't understand basic footwork. Mind you, we're not that far removed from Evan Tanner and Rich Franklin fighting each other in a title fight and crossing their feet to circle each other. Striking in MMA has come a long way and has a long way to go. But, what I was saying was he's doing much better at staying in his stance, and you see that his takedown defense becomes even more potent when he stays in that stance. When he was against Overeem and even against Blades, when he maintained his stance well, he could move off and he was always in position that he could try and hit the dude. And that's frightening. It's when, it's him being like, oh, I'm over my feet, I'll dig an underhook, and then getting leaned on against the fence and using his strength to keep himself up and eventually get free or have the referee break them. But that's not nearly as scary as him being able to control that distance in the stance, slide back, with like a cross-facing or something like that, and then throw the right hand afterwards. He's looking really mobile lately, and I really enjoyed that. In terms of mobility, Cain Velasquez, maybe not top of the heap. I listened to, disclaimer, I listened to the Heavy Hands boys before this podcast. I don't normally listen to or read anyone else's work on stuff before giving my opinion on it, because I wouldn't want to educate myself beforehand. Now, just because then I'll start seeing things that maybe I wouldn't have seen if I hadn't listened to them, and I'll start maybe missing things that I otherwise would have focused on. But they were both having a good laugh about that gif of Cain that I'd completely forgotten existed, of him warming up before his various fights and like jumping out of a squat, and then he's just jumping a little bit lower out of a squat, and then he's in a squat and like drags himself up on the fence, and you're just watching this dude's body crumble over the course of a few years. But he wheel kicked Travis Brown, so he's the best rounded striker of all time at heavyweight now. To be honest, it was only a few years ago that people were convinced this dude had great boxing. Because he wiggled his head a little bit before his 1-2, inevitable 1-2, jab overhand. And people were like, oh my god, look how slick this dude's boxing is. Oh, he caught Big Nog with a uppercut left hook. And if you can't catch Big Nog, you might just need to retire, because the dude was a walking heavy bag. Even in his best days, even when they kept going, he's been working down in Cuba with the boxing team, and it seemed like Rogerio was actually getting pretty good. You know, he got a medal in the Pan American Games for his boxing, but Big Nog would go down there, they'd clearly whoop him, and then he'd come back and be no better. And then, of course, you have to reference that one fight where he jabbed up Haritonov, which is more credit to Haritonov not being able to recognize when he's just being jabbed in the face constantly. You know, Haritonov would step in, Big Nog would do a dipping jab, and Haritonov would miss because he dipped and get jabbed because his head never moves. And he'd be like, I don't understand why this isn't working, and just keep walking forwards. But yeah, it used to be that we had to pretend that Cain Velasquez has amazing boxing. He has... The thing about Cain Velasquez is that there isn't really a change. You know, he doesn't... Most fighters have like one thing that they like to do. We talk about fighters who present questions and fighters who present answers. The ones who can adapt and change and provide answers tend to be the ones that I enjoy more or respect more and consider as better fighters overall, even though there's a great deal to be said for being so good at one thing that you can just jam it down someone's throat. You know, the Habib method and the Cain Velasquez method. His method has always been pace and wrestling and throwing right hands in between. Problem is that when he meets someone like Verdum, who can just keep using the double collar tie to break off the fence, if you take him down, he's still going to attack you, and he's got good kicks, and he's going to throw his 1-2 just as hard every time you throw your 1-2. He didn't really have any answers. He just pressed in more and more and got tired and then got guillotined while he was pressing in. So the dude isn't nearly as perfect as we all used to pretend he was, and I think Joe Rogan is partly responsible for the mythalization of Velasquez. Even when Stipe was actually beating the best guys in the world back to back to back, Joe Rogan was like, the only thing that I think of now is Cain in his prime. Like, Cain in his prime fought two dudes 5 times in the space of like 3-4 years. Junior Dos Santos, fair enough. But if you got 2 wins against Bigfoot Silver in the space of 5 years and no one else, that's not really good. That's just sort of tuning up your numbers. However, you know, even though I heard the Heavy Hands boys saying that, I'd recently been watching the I Am the Bay videos on YouTube, which are really good. They're these guys who film inside AKA, and I was watching a load of stuff, and, you know, Darian Wynn is a huge part of each of the videos, but he's only just sort of popped into my consciousness because of that fight with Tom Lawler on that god-awful Golden Boy card. You know, he's the one talent on that. Except Gleison Tebow, who left the UFC and spent his entire time doing lateral raises and had like 3 extra inches of width. I'd been watching a lot of that I Am the Bay stuff, and I thought that Cain was looking pretty good because they showed a few clips of him wrestling. I didn't see any of his striking, but he was just manhandling Darian Wynn. But Darian Wynn is not really like a heavyweight. I did see a lot of, like, in their pro sessions, there's an awful lot of fucking about which you could see leading to an injury. Because Darian Wynn breaks free of Cain Velasquez, runs, leaps over another pair who are sparring on the floor, and Cain Velasquez leaps over them too to chase him. Like, I can see how you fuck your knees up all the time. And then there's another clip where the dudes are wrestling and another pair have hit the mat, And I think it was DC when he was training for his short notice title fight against Derek Lewis. He just pushes the dude over the dudes who are on the mat. And I was like, Jesus Christ. I get that it's all fun and they're all laughing, but I could totally see how they get injured all the time. Not just because they had that retarded strength coach who was like, here's Cain Velasquez. He's going to do 100 swings with a 250-pound kettlebell. And then we're going to do 100 bodyweight leg extensions so that his quads tear his own patellas off. Pro science still happily welcomed in MMA. But let's talk about the specifics of this fight. There are things that Cain Velasquez has that match up interestingly against Francis Ngannou, but Francis Ngannou, spare the enigmatic Derek Lewis fight. I almost said, I almost led my Francis Ngannou video with Francis Ngannou is a bit of an enigma, and I thought, oh no, people are going to mishear that. He is a strange, mercurial character. That fight was bizarre. However, what we have seen of him has been incredibly convincing. He's still very much a rough prospect, but the danger of being hit every time you step in and his ability to stop takedowns generally is what keeps him in the game, or makes him so dangerous and carries him to the top of the heap. The thing is, Curtis Blaydes is not very good at convincing you that he's going to strike with you if all he wants to do is take you down. His striking is not very good. His shots were very telegraphed. Stipe Miocic did so well because he has probably the best jab you're going to see at heavyweight. You could maybe say Junior Dos Santos. They're sort of different sorts of jabs. Junior Dos Santos uses, and we'll be talking about Dos Santos a little bit in this podcast too, but Junior Dos Santos really uses that jab as sort of a hurting weapon, really loves the body jab, goes straight into the solar plexus or the sternum, and uses it to pick at the opponent and pick them apart, and open up bigger shots later. Stipe Miocic is very good at feinting with the jab, showing the feint, having the opponent flinch, and then shooting the real jab in the middle. It's just a lighter touch with the jab, I'd say. And obviously he builds his right hand onto that jab too. What he did against Ngannou was jab well between Ngannou's big swings. He showed the jab and then ducked on the leg and just snatched up the single. He showed the jab and then came with the jab, showed the jab, came with the right hand. And then there was a really good one that he used a lot of times in that fight, which is, if you get a chance to watch that fight again, skip through the ground portions because it really is static. It's hard to watch. But on the feet, he will feint, and Ngannou will swing the uppercut, and he'll put his left foot out at 45 degrees to swing as hard as he can. He'll hesitate, or he will throw it, and Stipe will immediately step up and inside kick that lead leg out. And it works beautifully every time. And the same thing happened against Blaydes the first time. He went southpaw and started trying to intercept with left uppercuts and left hands, and Blaydes was able to kick his lead leg out just by feinting him. Unfortunately, Blaydes didn't pick up on why that worked and didn't go back to it again. But that's Ngannou's thing. Anytime we're talking about a counterpuncher, whether it is Anderson Silva trying to land slick slips into back uppercut elbows, or it's Derek Lewis waiting for you to hit him so that when he feels the punch on his skull, he can throw the right hand back. Doesn't matter how high the level of science is. If you convince them something's coming and it isn't, you can get them second guessing themselves, or you can get them out of position and then do stuff from that position. I mean, getting people out of position and then capitalizing it is probably the thing that's most sorely lacking in MMA right now. People are recognizing that feints are incredibly useful, but so few guys capitalize on it. We were talking about it with Israel Adesanya the other day. One of the very few guys that does. Builds his feints into striking, further striking. And Miocic is very good at that. If you watch the Mark Hunt fight, he's just feinting and then ducking on the leg, feinting the duck on the leg, coming up with the jabs, jabbing, and, just mixing those legitimate and fake attacks in perfectly to catch Hunt out of position, or reaching for a jab, or, throwing his hands down and throwing his hips back to catch to stop the takedown. The feint to inside low kick is a perfect example of using someone's reaction and then punishing them for reacting too early or on time for a feint that then didn't really become an attack, of course. Now that's good, because Cain Velasquez has a very good inside low kick. I was always very impressed with Cain Velasquez's low kicks, probably because he's built like a trash can, and he has these big thick legs and he can kick pretty hard. He throws a lot of high kicks and things like that just aren't necessary. But I suppose if you've got the wrestling advantage, you might as well. But if he just stuck to the inside low kick and he feinted well with the jab, he could feint the jab, go with the inside low kick, come up with the inside low kick, follow with the right hand. Enrique caught Ngannou with that just the same. Ngannou's quite heavy on that front leg, and he does a lot of, in recent years, when he's not like shuffling his feet like the awkward old days, in recent fights, he's been bouncing back more, that small phasic motion that Bruce Lee always talked about. Both feet bounce back together, and he tries to throw the right hand or the left hook. And, then the lead leg is still out there. You're just having to step a little bit further and catch up with it. So all things that he can have that lead leg knocked out of his stance and then opened up for the right hand and opened up for the wrestling after that. Cain Velasquez is very good at using the right hand to get in on the hips afterwards. One of the things that you noticed in not the Ngannou, the Dos Santos fights was this guy's doing very well ducking under punches, and it's not because he's seeing the punches coming, it's because every time he throws the right hand, he level changes. And sometimes he goes, fuck, I'm too far away, and doesn't go for the leg or the hips, and sometimes he goes on the hips. But it led to Junior Dos Santos missing tons of left hooks, and people going, wow, his head movement's really sharp. No, it's just a constant factor, just constantly looking to drop on the hips. Now, Junior Dos Santos loved timing an uppercut just the same way that Francis Ngannou does, so it'll be quite interesting to see how Cain deals with that. The uppercut and the overhand are really what are playing off each other here. There's the big, puckered asshole, look out for that, moments that we'll be enjoying this fight where you breathe through your teeth, If you throw a right uppercut, you are in perfect position to eat an overhand. If you throw an overhand, your head comes down into the perfect position to eat the uppercut. It's one of those, the two weapons perfectly exploit the flaw in the other, or the biomechanical movement in the other weapon. I can give you examples of guys just getting taken out while throwing an uppercut by taking an overhand in the face as they did so. Shogun versus Henderson is a great example of that. I can give you examples of guys who got torn apart by uppercuts because they leaned heavy on their overhand. Uriah Faber versus Frankie Edgar. Edgar would catch the overhand on his left forearm and come back with a short right uppercut every single time. There was a point about the second round where after that point he just didn't miss on that counter ever. He's Frankie Edgar, so he didn't ever hit the guy hard, but he was landing it constantly. I think that's what's interesting in this fight. Francis Ngannou looks for the big uppercut and he drops his hands to do it. That could be disastrous for Cain Velasquez if he dives onto the uppercut, but it could be disastrous for Francis Ngannou if he drops his hands and eats the uppercut. That left hand is always low. Whether he's dropping it to throw a left uppercut, which he sometimes does, or he's dropping it to throw the right uppercut because he wants the underhook if the opponent does come in. It's that Mark Hunt style of keeping the non-punching hand low, even though you might get cracked in the head, just because you're more concerned about being taken down. I'm desperate to see Ngannou jab more. He's started to add the jab with the bouncing footwork that he does sometimes. That could really benefit him. But he is a guy who lives and dies by power, and it's very hard to convince them that the jab is worthwhile. If he put the effort into just landing 20, 30 jabs around, the right hand would find its place a lot easier, or the left hook or things like that. But you're getting away from that monstrous spectre, the aura that he has. I suppose you could always Sonny Liston it, just break the dude's face apart with power jabs. Shout out to the Sonny Liston history episode we did last month, wherein Chuck Wepner said that he could feel the bones in his face breaking every time that Liston hit him. But really, yeah, it's going to be interesting because the thing with the wrestling advantage is that you are... Ngannou's space to work is where Cain is out in the open and during his entrance. Anything after that really is Cain's world. If he can get in on the hips, if he can get a hold of him. And the great thing about Cain Velasquez, obviously, is that he's not Curtis Blades. He's not just desperate for the takedown. He's desperate to be... He wants to be on you. He just wants to be up in a clinch. He'll happily just work from there. Does a lot of good work with the single underhook and the head pin. Actually, shout out to co-main event boy, Paul Felder, who hits a glorious elbow off that head pin that you don't see a lot of dudes do. He did it to... Yeah, well, that's how he knocked out Oliveira. Head pin, lift the head up, and then slam in the upward elbow in place. Don't see anyone really doing that. It's really more looking for the knees to the body and the short punches. Cain Velasquez throws hundreds of those short punches, and obviously they do cause some swelling and stuff because Junior Dos Santos looked ridiculous by the end of both fights, or the second and third fight with Cain. But I'd love to see him focus on from that single underhook pin, you can bicep tie the other arm and just look for knees to the solar plexus, almost coming in from the side. And that's what I'd really like to see Velasquez work on. If you've seen Mir versus Cormier gets an underhook against the fence and he just jacks that underhook up. And it's back in the day when the refs were, for a short period, being like, yes, you can lean your hand on the top of the fence, but you can't grab it. It might have just been that fight, but the ref was absolutely fine with it. He was just jacking the hand up and putting it on the top of the fence. But he was using that underhook to crank Mir's elbow up away from his ribs, and then he was throwing in these beautiful Thai-style knees. And you were going, Daniel Cormier can throw nice swinging knees? That's quite surprising. But yeah, that'll really take it out of you, and you don't see those guys doing it. Those top wrestlers, those guys from AKA who love holding the single underhook pin. You'd think that Luke Rockhold would love that because he's just got monstrous kicks and knees. No, apparently not. Another thing I like about Cain Velasquez in this fight is that he has shown that he's fine to just dive after low singles and shit. Quite hard to catch you can catch a nice uppercut if you're going in for the hips. Very hard to catch a nice uppercut if the guy drops level and shoots across the floor from 7 feet out from you. And he did that to Dos Santos just to make Dos Santos work for the first, the opening of their second fight or their third fight. Can't remember which, but it was just like, yeah, I'm not just going to stand and box with you before I duck on your hips. I could just dive after your ankle if I wanted to. And that's the sort of thing that'll really get Ngannou worrying about the takedowns constantly. I mean, he's going to be worrying about the takedowns constantly, but if you keep it in his head, you've got a better chance of landing your overhands, and then when your overhands surprise him, you've got a better chance of getting a proper takedown. For Ngannou, I really like that floating back right hand he throws. He really is much better hitting going backwards than he is going forwards, and that's not to say that his hitting going backwards is beautiful, technically or mechanically, but that he's got, well, I said it in the short video, he's always had good power, or great power even, and a good eye for the counter. He understands exactly what Anderson Silva brought into MMA, and what every other great counterpuncher has realized. It's a lot easier to hit people when they're coming at you, especially if you're a big scary puncher. Chasing people is hard work. He does do sort of like a float back right hand. He does sort of he does still get caught where he's sort of standing in place and trying to throw the uppercut and then pummel on the shot immediately. I would love to see him work on that Roy Jones right hand that he used to use retreating. There's some great clips of him teaching it actually online. There's some great clips of him doing pad work with guys and showing them how to do it. But basically, the right foot goes back and stomps out a cigarette behind you so that the knee's pointing down as you throw your right hand. And then you can throw your left hand and bring your left foot back into your stance so you're still leaving. Or you can, if you crack them with the right hand, you can pursue them with the left, with the jab or the double jab. Roy Jones did a lot of cool punching going backwards in his career, but yeah, I reckon that sort of thing would help Ngannou. I think if I'm Ngannou, I would like to see him doing that, stepping back and punching. You can do it with the uppercut too, which is just gorgeous, but keeping the left hand high. I wouldn't be overcommitting on the shot. Well, it depends how confident he is stuffing takedowns, but that overhand is a constant factor, I would think, when you're throwing the right uppercut, because Cain's whole game is, I'm going to throw the overhand to get your left hand up. If your left hand's not up, I'm going to knock you out with the overhand, or at least hurt you. For Velasquez, I'd certainly like to see, the DC style of snatch single or snatching up the high crotch. You don't need to do a beautiful shot. You can just reach out and grab it. What's it called? The Iowa Hawks? What the fuck are they? I don't know, but they used to teach it with you grip the tendons on the back of the knee. You just put your hands in there and pull the leg to you. Chris Weidman does a great snatch single too. Stipe does a great snatch single, and he did it to Ngannou. I think what I love about it is that you can do it without really throwing your face onto the uppercut. The other thing you can do, of course, is the Khabib thing, where you fake with your head. You violently throw your head at the opponent so that they jump into a flying knee like McGregor, or an uppercut. And then you throw your head outside again and go for the head outside single. There's a lot of cool things you can do to misdirect people. And that's the most important thing. If you're going to be fighting Ngannou, you've got to be giving him looks that aren't the thing you're attacking with. And then you've got to attack with the thing that you gave him looks of later. so that he respects that thing later on. Misdirection is the key against the counterpuncher, and I will be very interested to see if Cain Velasquez can do that in this fight, because that's the whole thing. Cain Velasquez's fighting style has always been very honest. He's going to go at you, he's going to throw his hands, he's going to duck in on the shot afterwards, and he's going to try and pound you. It's a very straightforward, high-paced sort of style, where I think dudes might do better to be more deceptive against Ngannou, because he can't throw 50 punches around with the kind of power he throws. He can't wait on counter. He can't miss counters all day and then still throw with the same force. And even in the second round against Stipe, he was just so much less dangerous. Ngannou is at his most dangerous when he's not moving like a 240-pound man. There is a point where he's extremely quick. He's like a fucking panther. And then after a few punches, or when he's made to work, rather. We've only seen it against like Stipe, and I suppose in the Lewis fight, but he was still holding back in that. But even against Blades, he still had pop late into the fight in the the first fight. But if you can make him work and miss and wrestle and things like that, he really does slow down, and he's not nearly as dangerous after that. And then when he starts to move like his weight, when he's not just gliding on air, he is really not as frightening as I'd be frightened, but he's certainly not as frightening to someone who has a good gas tank and a good understanding of what he's going to throw back, because it's still quite a limited bag. This guy doesn't have a whole heap of tools. It's the counter uppercut, the counter right hand, the lean back left hook into the counter uppercut. He'll occasionally jab and then lean way forward for the right hand. He does a little bit more floating now, floating jabs, taking his feet with him rather than leaning out in front of him. But again, it's not. We're not talking Anderson Silva levels of variety here. We're talking about a dude who's got about 3 things he does, but he just waits and times dudes very well. Anyway, we've prattled on about that for about 20 minutes. What else is on this card that I like? James Vick versus Paul Felder. I completely forgot was happening. I completely forgot that James Vick was a person. That's how hard Gaethje knocked him out. And that's not a snub on James Vick. I've always quite enjoyed his fights. I just forgot. I was just like, well, close that book. That's a good fight. You've got the Irish Dragon. No, Paul Felder, and again, I don't want to pass off heavy hands views as my own, but they said exactly what a lot of us have been thinking about Paul Felder for a while. Like, he's billed as a striker, but really what he is a hitter. He's not like a technician or anything like that. And where he does good work is when he's got a hold of the opponent and they're either trading with him in a bad situation, or he's got a hold of them against the fence. He battered Oliveira from there, battered Stevie Ray on the mat with elbows. He's a very good hitter. He's just not great at particularly following people. If you watch the fight with Cruikshank will do the right hand, the dart out the side door, and he's doing the side kick when they follow, which is a Stephen Thompson favourite. They turn to face you, and they take the side kick in the gut, and they basically provide the force for that. You only really need to put your foot up. But he's kicking Paul Felder straight in the head, and Paul Felder's just walking onto it. Felder does have good low kicks, though, which I could see helping against someone like Vic, because Vic's got to stay away, but he's not particularly great at the ring craft stuff. I've just not seen Paul Felder do anything good in terms of cutting the cage a lot of the times. The thing about the thing I've previously written about Vic is that you can either pressure him or you can draw back and let him kick, and he'll put himself in bad positions. If you watch the fight with Beneil Dariush, he kicks, Benny falls back, immediately comes back in with a counter left hook or whatever, knocks him down, hurt him another time. It's that like convincing people to overreach works just as well as crowding them so that they can't kick. Vic's got a decent jab on him. I wouldn't say it's great, but then I wouldn't say that about anyone in MMA except Stipe. So yeah, that'd be interesting. I think Felder really should focus more on just making a brawl out of it and getting to the fence. Do what Big Nog did to have a short career resurgence. Just focus on that single underhook pin. Clearly he can knock dudes out from it. He's a good top player, and he can use his powerful low kicks to cut the cage and get into position. Because anytime the dude circles out left or right, you just kick the trailing leg, and you've slowed them down and you can move in on their hips or waist or whatever. What else is happening? Cynthia Cavallo versus Courtney Casey. I enjoyed Courtney Casey versus Michelle Waterson. Cynthia Cavallo was good fun. Who did she lose to in the end? because she was really hot prospect coming up. She did that awesome like anaconda choke to back, which you don't see very often. Oh yes, she lost to Cara Esparza, who keeps surprising people by actually being decent again now. But she just had a win again, submitted another last. So yeah, that'll be a good fun one. Oh, it was cancelled for January, and they put it. Oh yeah, because of course the UFC 2, whatever it was that we cancelled. Oh, Caceres versus Kron Gracie. That's a good one. Yeah, Kron Gracie, I've cautiously had my eye on. Still pulling guard. While you are doing it against high-level dudes now, just please don't. It just makes me worry so much. Kawajiri got caught by, having one hand on Kron's center line and trying to post up and hit with the other one. And as soon as he did, Kron just knocked that elbow in, reached across Kawajiri's back, and had like an arm drag position and could start working towards his back. And he's done that to a few guys. What I'm wondering is, because if you watch any Kron match in Rising, if you watch any match in Rising, dudes are falling out of the ring, refs are pushing back in, you're sort of like having to hold yourself back all the time. In this fight, Alex Caceres, if he does get guard pulled on him, if he just pushes to the fence, keeps Kron's head against the fence, there's your armbar pretty much gone as long as you stack them up. If you stack them up, very hard for them to get on your back too, and you can drop elbows on them pretty much freely. Kron Gracie is probably pretty proud of his ground game, but does he have the wall walk down? He's not fought in the cage before, as far as I know. Maybe in his first fight, can't remember. But yeah, the modern game doesn't focus so heavily on the submissions because we have the wall there to walk up, which is like the number one way to get out from underneath someone and avoid being stalled out on the bottom for the entire fight. Also, Caceres has the luxury of having elbows, so he's not going to have to awkwardly hold Kron's head down and try and hammer fist him like Kawajiri was trying to do, and Tokoro for some reason. And, I think we'll find out. Obviously, Kron's already a better fighter than his dad because his dad fought no one. But when Hickson fought Takada for the second time, we all basically said, yeah, that's fucking ridiculous. Why would Takada be able to fight now if he couldn't fight the first time? Takada focused on keeping the underhooks in the clinch. And when he had double underhooks every time that Hickson closed, Hickson couldn't do anything. He had no takedowns that he could use. There was like 5 minutes of them just in the clinch while Hickson can't do anything. And then Takada hits him with a knee that drops him, and Hickson's eyes fill like with tears. It looks like a bad one. Finally he does get Takada down, but he was so bad when he couldn't get the fight to the ground just off an easy shot or something like that. Kron Gracie's striking has actually positively surprised me, but then he's been working with the Diaz's, so he'll probably be pretty adept in at least getting hit. But I'm just wondering what he can do if Alex Caceres can stop the takedown, neutralize the guard pull, or just make him lose the round off the guard pull by moving him to the fence and not doing much, or marking him up with elbows and keeping him stacked. I'm wondering what Kron can do then. What takedowns does he have in the back pocket? Aside from a snap down into a guillotine, which was awesome in ADCC. He had an incredible guillotine. But lots of other fun stuff on that card. But I only really wanted to just sort of jump in to talk about Cain Velasquez versus Francis Ngannou, because Cain Velasquez is such a mystery. He's clearly taken it out of his body, but what does he have left? But anyway, if you want to sign up to the Patreon, it allows me to do things like this, rather than doing the thing that I claim is my job, writing. And you get history episodes. There's a new one coming out very, very soon. Imminently, in fact. And if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsconbypodcast@gmail.com. We'll do some questions next week. And everything I'm doing at the moment is on the Fight Primer, so I don't know what I'm writing next or for whom, but if I do, it'll be up there. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Cain Velasquez's knee tendons bless.